The educational thought of the 20th century is composed of various ideologies, which have profoundly influenced modern educational paradigms and actual problems. Traditionally, education is rooted in ideologies that emphasize social aspects. This ideology aims to prepare individuals to fulfill their roles as members of society and contribute to the public good through education. Social traditionalism emphasizes the acquisition of cultural heritage and social adaptation, establishing strict educational standards to cultivate competent members of society. This educational thought tends to be conservative, placing importance on past educational methods and efforts to maintain traditional values in education. In contrast, the progressive educational ideology known as social experimentation focuses on developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills so that individuals can grow through their social lives. Ideal progressivism seeks educational methods that allow human talents and cooperation to foster complete human development. This ideology acknowledges that education is not merely a means of knowledge transmission but a complex process achieved through the interaction of individuals and society, providing students with the support they need to realize their potential. The new education movement that emerged from the late 19th century to the early 20th century emphasized child-centered education and activity-based learning, prioritizing practical and useful knowledge grounded in real-life experiences. Within this trend, liberal education thought has taken shape based on individual freedom and unique abilities, enabling students to progress independently. The Montessori method emphasizes autonomous learning for students, indirectly demonstrating the effectiveness of tailoring educational programs to match children's interests and needs. However, the success of such progressive approaches has not always been guaranteed, leading to simultaneous dissatisfaction and contradictions concerning education quality at present. The education policy in the UK reflects serious conflicts between progressives and conservatives, with this tension arising from the struggle between traditional and progressive teaching methods. Early educational philosophy is still rooted in traditional approaches, with teachers generally focusing on delivering accumulated human knowledge to students in structured ways. Nonetheless, the growing emphasis on educational experience and progressive vision has gradually led to changes in the educational environment. These changes have ultimately laid the groundwork for the broader dissemination of progressive educational philosophy in the educational field. However, the introduction and expansion of progressivism have accompanied various problems. Elementary education policies, including the abolition of ability-based class organization and the emphasis on discovery-based learning, have sparked debates. Although progressive educators aim to enhance students' autonomy and creativity, there is now evidence that these efforts have resulted in a decline in education quality and learning outcomes. In particular, students studying in a progressive environment tend to lag behind those who receive instruction in a more stringent, teacher-led atmosphere. These outcomes have intensified criticism of progressive methodologies. As various research results analyze the effectiveness of classroom management and teaching methods, public opinion has begun to shift in a more anti-progressive direction. The Labour Party announced its intention to reform existing educational methods by organizing classes based on students' similar abilities and reintroducing phonics and direct instruction. However, during this process, complaints arose regarding the lack of consideration for diverse opinions or choices within the educational field. The central government of the UK imposed a uniform educational vision, ignoring the opinions and thoughts of the public and pushing through its established educational policies. Such policies have exacerbated confusion in the educational sector, leading to criticisms that the functions of schools and the direction of education have been lost. The 11+ exam, taken by students aged 11 and older in the UK, serves as a criterion for classifying students based on their academic performance. This system leads to an inequality of educational opportunities, as students with higher scores may gain admission to prestigious grammar schools while those with lower scores are relegated to secondary modern schools. After World War II, opposition to this selective classification system was spearheaded by progressive and socialist educators. They argued that the 11+ exam was imprecise and inhumane, prompting the Labour government to declare the termination of this system. This policy advocated for the establishment of a single comprehensive secondary school that all children could attend, regardless of ability. However, traditionalists criticized this policy as anti-meritocratic, and the emergence of a conservative government resulted in a reversal of this policy. Following the Labour Party's reclamation of power, the comprehensive school policy was revived, and local educational authorities were required to establish comprehensive schools. However, due to the re-election of the Conservative Party, this law was rendered void, and the practice of classifying students through the 11+ exam remained entrenched in the education sector. Although this system may benefit certain students, it has faced considerable criticism. Parents argued that it is challenging to accurately categorize 11-year-old children, and the results of this examination deprive them of the right to choose the most suitable education for their children, exacerbating educational inequality. Progressive educators have pointed out that government-led grouping based on ability can reflect socioeconomic classes, emphasizing that many students may regret attending secondary modern schools later on. Their arguments highlight the conflict between the Labour Party's assertion of educational equality and the views of anti-progressive factions, revealing a clash with the belief that all students should access the same comprehensive schools. Such attempts at comprehensive education have come into conflict with parental choice. Parents have found themselves restricted from choosing schools that align with their children's interests and abilities. Proponents of this integration argue that schools should achieve equality within public education, yet this can lead to the neglect of the demands and aspirations of specific groups. Concerns about maintaining selective schools and social inequality led to the approval of policies to close private schools at the Labour Party conference. However, having attempted to avoid such radical measures, efforts to fully integrate public schools have faced resistance when choices made by politicians contrasted with the Labour Party's educational policies. Ultimately, support for comprehensive education remains coupled with continuous criticism and concerns about limited opportunities. Furthermore, evaluations of educational outcomes have failed to take hold, and students' performance has tended to be more differential in comprehensive schools compared to grammar schools and secondary modern schools. Amid this context, the Conservative government instituted a national curriculum that all public schools were required to adopt, reflecting the government's educational priorities while dismissing both student and parental input. With the implementation of the self-governing school system, schools have been allowed to break free from local educational authority control and apply directly for financial support from the central government. However, the examination results of these self-governing schools have faced criticism for not accounting for students' ability differences upon entry. As a result, self-governing schools have been constrained by the national curriculum while also facing limitations on educational freedom. The advantages and disadvantages of self-governing schools remain debatable, and it is anticipated that further review will be necessary regarding their standing and operations depending on changes in educational policy. Recently, test results for students under the national curriculum reveal that initial performance tends to be good. However, academic achievement tends to decline as students progress through grade levels. This outcome indicates that the quality of education may deteriorate from elementary to middle school. Additionally, international comparisons suggest that the UK continues to struggle, with substantial funding for education failing to translate into improved academic performance, leading to widespread concerns. The American public school system has encountered similar challenges. The average academic performance of students has seen little improvement, and there are emerging concerns about the declining effectiveness of instruction in public schools. Even high-achieving students are showing declining trends in their scores, and the proportion of students achieving high marks in language subjects has drastically decreased. The reasons behind these declines may point to lowered intelligence among learners or a lack of readiness to learn, as educators attribute this to the deteriorating home environment and societal attitudes toward education. Nevertheless, data suggest that students' intellectual abilities are improving, raising further questions. While students now receive more education than previous generations, the simultaneous decline in educational quality and achievement levels constitutes a grave concern. The public school system in the United States is ranked among the most inefficient educational systems globally, and standardized tests administered in many states fail to accurately assess student learning levels. The issues extend beyond mere testing inaccuracies, as evidence indicates potential manipulation of scores and adjustments to curricula to inflate performance results, leading to distorted assessments of educational outcomes. Notably, the number of students classified with learning disabilities in public schools has surged. This may indicate a failure of certain instructional methods and systemic issues within public education itself. Blaming educational shortcomings solely on specific disabilities may misrepresent the complexities of these failures and highlight the structural flaws in the U.S. education system. Public schools require extensive administrative resources, rendering them less efficient when compared to private institutions. Though the budget for public schools is consistently increasing, the quality of education has either stagnated or even declined. Analysis points out that schools with higher per-student spending still report poor academic performance, underscoring existing structural challenges that remain unresolved. Some public schools operate effectively, characterized by clear goal setting, strong leadership from principals, and efficient instructional methods. However, this success tends not to be universally applicable, reflecting an inherent issue. Successful schools often thrive when autonomy is granted, and external meddling is minimized. Conversely, public schools often face limitations on decision-making due to bureaucratic interference. This lack of innovation contributes to stagnation in the educational landscape, recognized as linked to centralized planning's limitations and challenges arising from political situations. These public school issues are not unique to the United States, highlighting the need for a global reassessment of education systems grappling with similar challenges. A more fundamental systemic reform is imperative as different political factions vie for educational authority. The emergence of new curricula sparked by progressive educational movements often replaces traditional subjects with experimental content that may address contemporary issues. However, such shifts have been met with considerable backlash from parents and the community, resulting in growing distrust in the educational system. The politicization of public education has transformed schools into battlegrounds for conflicting interests, adversely affecting student education. Reform initiatives, though framed as progress, have occasionally overlooked the essential goal of education itself, fostering holistic development in students. Japan's educational system serves as a notable case, illustrating public education challenges. While Japanese students consistently achieve high scores in international math competitions, these achievements are attributed to various factors outside the public school system, including a competitive entrance exam system, high parental commitment, capable teachers, and a thriving private tutoring sector. Pervasive among these issues is the bureaucratic overreach of Japan's school management, which limits adaptability in response to evolving educational needs. Conflicts between teacher unions and the government often impact educational policy decisions, rendering student and parental input largely ignored. The massive private tutoring market, worth billions of dollars annually, has become integral to Japan's educational landscape. Juku, or cram schools, fill the gaps left by rigid formal education, providing supplementary lessons for university entrance exams, remedial subjects, and advanced learning opportunities. While the Ministry of Education sometimes adopts a hostile stance toward Juku, parents frequently criticize the ministry for hindering educational freedom, demonstrating a disconnect. Juku institutions avoid imposing rigid curriculums. Instead, they assess student needs and parental desires to curate tailored classes, ensuring students receive personal attention. This flexibility allows for diverse learning experiences that public schools often lack. Despite some criticisms, such as a tendency to focus excessively on rote memorization, the onus ultimately lies on societal demands rather than exclusively on Juku. Japan's educational atmosphere prioritizes academic credentials over individual talents, hobbling innovation and growth in educational methodologies. Additionally, while university entrance exams demand a level of critical thinking and comprehension that cannot be achieved solely through rote learning, Juku has succeeded in developing advanced methods to promote overall student competence. Nevertheless, concerns persist regarding Juku's potential contribution to educational inequality, suggesting that the standardized approach common in mainstream schools may be a significant factor in systemic disparities. Students of varying abilities benefit from a tailored educational experience at Juku, satisfying parental aspirations for individualized education. Japan's educational structure mandates a uniform learning pace across all institutions, enforced by extensive bureaucratic constraints. Educational bureaucrats display resistance to innovation, further alienating parents and students from decision-making processes. This environment fosters rapid growth in the supplementary education sector, reflecting the inadequacies of the core public school system. Canada confronts many similar challenges as its public education system faces persistent quality concerns alongside escalating discontent. The expansion of public schools often aligns more closely with government ideology than parental wishes, emphasizing performance metrics that educators prioritize over well-being. Consequently, The increasing authority granted to bureaucrats in school governance has marginalized parental influence, creating a disconnect that needs to be addressed at all levels. Countries must break free from outdated educational ideologies and models that do not serve contemporary learners' needs. The crisis in public education calls for comprehensive reforms that prioritize tangible outcomes rather than merely introducing superficial policy changes. Collaborative opportunities for educators and parents are essential, fostering environments where students can realize their full potential. It is crucial to design curricula that reflect the changing demands of modern society while considering diverse learning styles and needs, thus adopting an inclusive approach. Ultimately, the goal of education transcends mere knowledge transmission. It involves fostering the development of competent individuals who are well prepared for future challenges. This requires the collective efforts of all stakeholders to enhance educational quality and facilitate meaningful change that yields substantial benefits for individual students and society as a whole. Global educational reform serves as a cornerstone for future success, becoming the key to building a better tomorrow. Education is the foundation for the future, starting with creating environments where every student has access to the learning opportunities they desire. Today's educational reforms must yield tangible, positive outcomes for future generations, necessitating continuous commitment from all stakeholders. Only when systematic change occurs will we be able to establish a superior educational landscape, leading to a better society.